Okay, Exploring Mars, Painting the Science Dream. As soon as I submitted that title and emailed it out, I regretted it. But I'll talk to you this evening about my personal efforts to try to combine science and art in advancing the exploration of Mars. Let's start with this. As a scientist, and this is also consistent with the recommendation, or at least the finding of the report, which is that the top priority, scientific priority for humans on Mars will be the search for life. Life that's either extant, meaning still alive, or fossil. And what's at stake is really remarkable, and I think is nicely illustrated in this diagram. What you have in the middle is known as the tree of life on Earth. All life forms, past and present, map onto this tree. You, me, my dog, the squirrels outside, the trees. We are all sharing this tree of life, and the closer we are to another branch of this tree, the more DNA we share in common with it. For those of you who are biologists, this is technically a 16S ribosomic RNA tree, but essentially it expresses your phylogeny, your proximity in genetic content with other life forms. And when we say we want to go to Mars to search for life, what we're really saying is that we want to find a form of life that is alien. In the report from the National Academies, we did not use that word. We called it indigenous life. But really what we're trying to find is something that does not map onto the tree of life on Earth. And in order to determine that a life form that you found on Mars is somehow alien, not mapping onto this tree, you would have to do genetics on it. You would have to look also maybe at its proteins, if it has any, and what amino acids make up these proteins. But ultimately, that means that you have to find it alive, really. So to some extent, just finding a fossil would be ambiguous because Earth and Mars swap meteorites. Asteroids and comets can hit the Earth or Mars and lob rocks into space, which then can land on another planet. So technically, it's conceivable that Mars could have had life, but it sort of came from the Earth. Or conversely, life started on Mars, seeded the Earth, and we're all Martians. These are all possibilities that are not ruled out, but the key thing then is to find something that could set us apart genetically or protein-wise. So that's what's at stake in the search for life on Mars. Now, to address this, I personally have been leading a number of, in fact, at this point, over 40 field campaigns in the Arctic and Antarctica to amazing places that are one step towards Mars. The main project that keeps me occupied every summer is the Houghton Mars Project. We go to Devon Island in the high Arctic, and it's a place that is a geological wonderland in terms of similarities with Mars, but it's also a place that we use to test new technologies and strategies for exploration, including for human exploration. So going back to this incredible painting by Chesley Bonestell from 1956, Chesley remains a total inspiration for myself, for, of course, generations of scientists and artists. But there's an entire community still here, some of whom are members of the International Astronomical Association of Astronomical Artists, who are really inspired and are following in his footsteps. It's sort of a school of space artists that exists around us. Anyway, this is a classic painting, but I started noticing after doing years of Mars science and engineering work on future technologies that it was getting outdated, and I had the hubris of trying to give a refresher to this painting and painted a new version of it, and I'll go into the details about what's different in a bit. But here's the remake. It's both an homage to Chesley Bonestell, but also an update to his wonderful work. Okay. So let's take a quick look at some of the differences. The land and the sky. Okay. Chesley somehow had predicted there would be canyons on Mars, but maybe he didn't imagine how monumental they could be, so my canyon sort of extends towards the horizon and disappears into the atmosphere because it's so vast. Also, the sky that Chesley had painted was a stratospheric blue. We knew that Mars had an atmosphere. We knew it was thin, and so therefore it might look like the Earth's stratosphere in color. But as it turns out, it's loaded with dust all the time, and so it has yellowish to pinkish to grayish hues, depending on time of day and season. And you can see the sky behind the Perseverance rover when it took its selfie. It's sort of that that scale of colors that I try to replicate in the painting. Then in terms of the rocketry, Caroline Russo just told you about the deployment of the vertical rocket for von Braun. I've painted something that is inspired by Starship designs from SpaceX, but it's at the same time it's quite different. It's got little winglets. It allows you to maybe glide a little more through Mars's thin atmosphere to get you to your landing site. But there are other technologies and approaches to go to Mars. We can, and one of my favorite ones would be nuclear thermal propulsion, because that could cut the journey down from 6 months or so to get to Mars to something like 3 to 4 months, which of course would be a lot better. And then the spacesuits. Carolyn noted as well that Chesley Bonestell had picked the blue color for the spacesuits. Why blue? Because blue is the complementary color to orange. And so it'd be the most visible color for you and your teammates if you were lost in the yellow and brownness of Mars, so that you could keep track of each other. I've also added numbers to our backpack so that you could tell who's who. You're not tapping on everybody's back to figure out who you want to talk with if you lost comms. And through our work on Devon Island, we've tested for 2.5 decades a variety of incremental designs of spacesuits for Mars with Collins Aerospace, more classically known for their spacesuit division as Hamilton Sundstrand. And the bottom line is that the Mars suit, we think, will look something like this blue suit with a hard upper torso. In other words, a pretty robust top part for the suit. It's a rear entry suit, so the backpack opens like a refrigerator door. You climb in legs first, your legs go down and your feet go down to the boots, then you insert the arms, then you or somebody who helps you closes the backpack behind you and off you go. You want to protect your lower legs with these rubber wrappers that will prevent sharp rocks from puncturing your suit. And the number of other features that I don't have time to go into, but this is what it might look like. The biggest challenge, though, with this Mars suit is that it is still way too heavy. The current spacesuit that we have used on shuttle and the space station and still use, weighs on Earth 300 pounds. Okay, 300 pounds. So thankfully we use it in low Earth orbit where we have microgravity, so that's not too heavy. But if you were to take this suit to the moon, where gravity is 6 times less than on the Earth, 300 divided by 6, that's 50 pounds. You can manage with that. The new suit that Axiom is building is also going to weigh approximately 300 pounds, at least for now. That's what it's looking like. That is way too heavy on Mars, because gravity on Mars is not 17% of that of the Earth, it's 38% of that of the Earth. So a 300-pound suit on Mars would have a felt weight of about 125 pounds. Way too heavy for you to do field work. So the big challenge we face is to cut the mass of our current spacesuit design in half. You want the spacesuit to weigh no more than about 150 pounds on Earth, so that by the time you take it to Mars, it has a felt weight of about 60 pounds, which will still be heavy. And so here's a solution we found with Collins Aerospace. You can't think of the Martian astronaut anymore, at least with this classic approach to spacesuits, as just the human being and their suit. It's actually the human being, their suit, and their ATV. And the ATV, this little vehicle, is going to drive you around and carry basically the weight of all the reserve supplies that you need for your backpack. Okay. So essentially you offload from your backpack the heavy components, mainly oxygen tanks, at least part of them, the big batteries, at least part of them, and the water tanks, at least part of them, so that you're left with a spacesuit that is much lighter than a full suit with 8 to 10 hours of autonomy. You end up with a small spacesuit that has maybe an autonomy of only an hour and a half or 2, but at least your ATV, which is a smart ATV, it follows you everywhere you go. And if it doesn't want to follow you anymore, then you probably shouldn't be there either yourself. You can just basically sit back on it, connect, and recharge your backpack as you drive along. But that's sort of the only solution to really maintain some practical ability to explore Mars. Then we have the drone and the smart glove. The person on the edge of the cliff in Chesley Bonstell's painting is just taking pictures. He has a camera in his hand. He wants an aerial view of from the top of the cliffs. We think that we might actually be able to deploy a drone and fly around and take aerial photos. We know that we can fly aircraft now on Mars. The JPL and NASA Ingenuity helicopter was awesome. And on Devon Island, we have worked out a smart glove which allows you to fly even a drone single-handedly by just moving fingers. If you're curious to see how that works, we have a video on YouTube called Astronaut Smart Glove. And it's just seven minutes long, but you should take a look. Pressurized rovers. Chesley's pressurized rover was essentially a World War II tank recycled into a cylinder that's on wheels with a glass bubble. That's not a bad start. And however, with the work we did on Devon Island and also, of course, with NASA and the Johnson Space Center, the design of a pressurized rover has evolved. We want a robotic arm in the front. We want some suit ports in the back if we can help it. Suit ports allow you to enter directly into your spacesuit from the inside of the pressurized rover so that you never walk into the cabin of your habitable volume with a dusty suit. And so that's how I ended up with the design I have. The design of the rover in the Martian is terrible in a number of ways. It's too angular. You need something that's more rounded to spread the stresses of a high-pressure environment inside. And then you don't want to swing that big door open every time you go out because you're going to lose a huge volume of oxygen into the Martian environment. Plus, you climb back in from your spacewalk, and now you're completely coated in dust. You're going to dust up your inside environment. So it's very bad at a number of levels, but I'll just spare them the rest. So pressurized rover might look like a submarine on wheels, except that, of course, you have a higher pressure on the inside than on the outside. With just one, though, you risk ending up in this painting of mine called The Predicament, where you get stuck, and so now you regret because you actually have a second rover on Mars, but you became complacent, and now you were just thinking you could do traverses with just one rover, and sure enough, that's the day you get stuck. So, big lesson from expeditioning, never be complacent. You want to have two rovers, so here's what it might look like from the sky, a pressurized rover caravan with two pressurized rovers and some ATVs following in tow, visiting an impact crater. So you can see you approach the impact crater, but you can't get quite straight to the rim. You have to go around and negotiate your way through the impact ejector blanket until you find a sign to the visitor center, and then you drive up there. This is a view simply of two rovers careening through the canyons of Mars in the morning with a lot of fog still in the canyons. And then finally the base. Chesley Bonstell had just this one temporary bubble set up. In his later paintings, once we knew that there were impact craters on Mars and opportunities for long-range exploration, he modified the design of his base and started using a star-shaped formation. So that's what we adopted, both in the Arctic for our base camp, but also in my remake of that painting. So 65 years separate these two paintings. And you would think that by now we would have gotten it right, but I'm here to tell you that in the last 5 years there have been so many new developments that I'm going to have to work on a third iteration of this thing, of the scene, with some new technologies. We've been testing tethered balloons, for example, with quite a bit of success. As you drive around, you have real-time, low-altitude aerial surveys going on to do recon of the terrain ahead of you, to also look at what the atmosphere is doing. We've also found some incredible features on Mars, even in recent times. Saurabh Shubham, who is a graduate student here in planetary geology at the University of Maryland, who's here tonight. Thanks for showing up, Saurabh. And I somehow found this giant volcano that was hiding in plain sight for 50 years, just a year and a half ago, called Noctis Volcano. It's at the western end of Valles Marineris. The point is, Mars still has geological wonders that they're still hiding in plain sight, some of them, and we should really continue to learn about those. But the volcanoes on Mars, there are many of them, and the big ones are incredibly interesting because they seem to have gigantic lava tubes. And we found so far about, we meaning the planetary science community, have found at this point, over 1,000 pits, cave entrances, tectonic depressions that might lead to the interior of Mars across the planet, but mostly in the volcanic provinces. And so here's one of my favorite pits. It's called the Jeanne Pit. It's on Arsia Mons. It's 150 meters across. It's one of those rare pits where you cannot actually see the bottom. So we call it the bottomless pit. It's at least 180 meters deep. So I painted what rappelling down, well, using a cable actually with a lift, into this cave might look like. And then who knows? Once you're in a cave, you see you're in a very different environment from what's at the surface. Radiation is now shielded, micrometeorite impacts, stark day-night temperature changes. You're in a very cozy environment. And in the context of a volcano, it might even be warm. So it's an incredibly exciting place to look for signs of life, possibly even extant life on Mars. Deva mentioned to you that there are dust storms in many places on Mars. I just picked this one image of a fantastic dust storm careening towards this volcano that Saurabh and I mapped out. And you can see how it actually gets optically thick. In other words, if you were at the surface, you actually, the landscape becomes opaque, at least the atmosphere becomes opaque, and you can't see the landscape anymore. I tried to portray this with this painting, and then, of course, Carolyn showed the beautiful one from Ludek Peszek of this dust storm about to engulf an early base on Mars. So who will this person be? This is an oil painting I did of this Mars astronaut with a name tag left blank. I actually go to schools with this thing, elementary schools and high schools, and I write the name of students on the blank name tag. It's a pretty popular thing. But we don't know who this person will be, who will walk on Mars first or even second. And at this point in the last 5 years, we're starting to wonder if this person will even be a biological human. With the rapid progress that we're making with Android, robots, and AI, including artificial general intelligence, there are prospects that we will achieve essentially something that is as capable as a human being, except not requiring oxygen to breathe and food to feed or to eat, who might be resilient or made resilient to the Martian environment, in which case you're much better off sending something that is as smart as you, as capable as you are physically, but not needing all the red tape to survive on Mars. So this is a scene that's actually generated by AI, of course, showing an AI android assisting 3 human explorers, who of course need spacesuits to survive. I recently wrote a paper called The Artificial Astronaut, or at least Going to Mars in the Age of AI. And the thinking is that for the past decades, on the x-axis you have the years of recent times and into the future. For past decades, we always knew that we wouldn't just send humans to Mars alone, they would be assisted by robots. But it was generally thought that the robots that would assist you would be pretty dumb, and that you'd essentially have to be doing all the thinking on Mars. But with this exponential progress that we're seeing now with robotics and AI, we are really at a time when things are shifting. It's difficult to plan a human mission to Mars with so much progress in AI and robotics, with humans being the centerpiece of the expedition. I mean, to what extent do you assist them? And what types of tools can you think that they will need and give them? There might be a point actually where you would be better off making humans as biological beings traveling to Mars and beyond as something that's somewhat rare compared to sending armies of resilient android robots. And you might think, well, that steals the thunder of the sharing of the excitement of exploration. But I don't think so, because we still relate to robots like they are machines when it's perseverance and opportunity. But the way that the society is moving forward with robotics and AI is to actually turn these robots and androids into essentially humans, from the standpoint of our interaction with them, from the standpoint of our emotional connection to them. And so very much so, we might get to the point where we'd be quite happy to be able to send them, and we will think of them as our offspring, or friends, or incarnations of ourselves even, to Mars and beyond, and be quite accepting of that need to explore. In any case, once we achieve artificial superintelligence, there's no stopping there, in the sense that we can now envisage missions to Titan, interstellar missions. Interstellar travel is usually limited to two possibilities: hibernation or multi-generational spaceships, where you leave the Earth, but then you'll never get to the destination, but maybe you're many generations down the road, one lucky generation will get to see the end point. Well, I think the solution really to interstellar travel is to have just your DNA traveling to the star, and the caretakers on board would be just android robots who would essentially wake up and clone you at the far end once you get to the Goldilocks planet. Okay. And that's an open-ended journey that can last for very long. So I'll just leave you with this, and thank you for the opportunity.